Over the past couple of years, I've done a lot of one-on-one coaching with high-income earners in LA, San Francisco, Oakland, San Diego, Seattle, DC, New York City, and Toronto. And there's not a lot of video content out there about how to budget for your unique situation. It's sort of assumed that if you make a high income, then cash flow and budgeting shouldn't be a problem. But you know as well as I do, that's not always the case. Even if you make a high income, if you live in a high cost area, that money can go out just as quickly as it comes in. So that's why in this video, I want to share with you 9 tips that high income earners in high cost of living areas can apply to their YNAB budget. All right, now the first tip is to simplify your accounts. You can see over here in this specific setup, I've got one checking, one savings on budget, which I'll talk more about here in a minute, a wallet, which I think is very optional. If you're not running a lot of cash, I would actually just have you delete this and treat cash sort of as once it's become cash, it's sort of gone and out of sight, out of mind, at least when you're starting out. And then I've got a couple of credit cards here. I've seen way too many high income or high cost areas, open up their YNAB and have 2 or 3 checking accounts, 2 or 3 savings accounts, and 7+ credit cards or lines of credits all in their on budget settings. And then what happens is they end up with a ton of money in to be budgeted and a crazy amount of categories and stuff going on, and it's simply overwhelming. What I want you to do is try really hard to simplify your account structure. I typically recommend one checking account, even if you're married. Try using YNAB for only the joint stuff for now, so have your joint checking in here. One savings on budget, which is going to be used to correlate to this savings on budget category right down here. You can watch my YNAB savings guide video if you haven't seen that, but these categories will perfectly represent this savings on budget account. And then, like I said, even though we have a couple credit cards in here that maybe we're trying to pay down, what I would prefer you do is pick one credit card, maybe 2 at the most, that you're going to start using and only use those rather than, spreading out your transactions for a month across 6 or 7 different cards. Try really hard to only use 1 or 2 cards, especially when you're getting started with YNAB. A theme that you're going to see me come back to over and over again in this video is the importance of simplification so that you will actually stick to your budget. And speaking of simplifying, that brings me to the next tip, which is to simplify your category structure and your category groups. You may have seen my YNAB beginner's guide video where I lay out a few different groups and the structure that I sort of like to follow. This example budget here is very similar to what I covered in that video with a few small differences, and I'm going to point those out now. But before I do, I want you to think about the fact of why we separate categories and groups the way that we do. And ultimately, it has to do with the reports, because in a month or 2 or 3 from now, you're going to be analyzing these reports to try and see where your money is actually going. So we want to think about how should we best organize our expenses in a way that would make the reports helpful or useful. If we just threw everything into one big category, that's probably too simple. Then we wouldn't be able to really see a breakdown of where our money is going. On the flip side, if we have too many groups, then our money's going to be way too dispersed, and that's not going to be helpful either. So we want to find a nice middle ground to where we can see how our money is getting spent across a handful of groups and where we can see the large chunks are ultimately going. So what I typically recommend for high income earners is to try and not have more than 15 groups total and never have more than 15 categories inside of a single group. For example, this fixed expenses and debt repayment, I could add all these mortgages, car loans, and student loans up here into the fixed expenses group because ultimately they're fixed expenses too, just like, Netflix or Hulu, they have an amount and due date. But if I did that, that fixed expenses group starts getting really, really large, which is a common thing that I tend to see for high income folks is just a ton of fixed bills. So what I would like to do is see if there are any commonalities among these fixed expenses that we can break out into another meaningful group. In this case, what I've done is I've put the mortgage, the car loans, and the student loans together into a debt repayment group. So this way we can see how much monthly is going to debt versus other sort of ongoing fixed bills. You could also probably group together things like internet, Netflix, Hulu, and cell phone and create like a subscription group if you wanted to do that, for example. The point here is just to try and find the balance between having too many groups and too many categories inside of a group. And I found that if you get more than about 15 categories inside of a group, it starts to get overwhelming and not as meaningful for what that group truly represents. The last thing I want to say about simplifying your categories is that if you have a lot of shopping at, let's call them big box stores, right? So Amazon, Target, Costco, and you're buying a lot of things. You know, most of us, Amazon, it could be groceries, could be household items, cosmetic items, entertainment, kid stuff, fun spending. It could be a lot of different things. So when you're first starting out in YNAB, what I recommend doing is just having an Amazon category and then put everything that gets done on Amazon into that category. Most of you, if you have a lot of transactions, are going to be linking your accounts, which means that YNAB is going to automatically import those transactions. So rather than trying to spend a million hours hunting down what the Amazon charge actually was, just throw it into the Amazon category. You can always get more complex over time down the road once you have a really good handle on YNAB. For now, create a Target category, create an Amazon category, create a Costco category. Just throw all those transactions in there and then move on with your life. We're just trying to do an 80-20 here. And the main goal is just to keep you moving and actually using YNAB. Okay, so while we're on the topic of accounts and categories, I want to show you a sort of brand new type of category and account that I found to be really helpful for folks who have fluctuating income. So this is tip number 3. If you've got fluctuating income and you maybe are commission paid or you get large bonuses throughout the year, I want to encourage you to consider an income holding group and then an income holding account. Now, this is important. When you set up this income holding account, you're going to want to do it by adding your account, clicking linked or unlinked, either way is fine. But the main point is that when you get to this screen to select the type of account, you want to choose asset, not checking. Even though it might be a checking account, you want to choose asset so that it gets this money off budget and down here into your tracking section. Okay, so what's the purpose of this account? Well, like I said, this is really for people who are commission-based, sales-based, or get large bonuses throughout the year. What I want you to do is go to your employer and actually change your direct deposit account from the main checking account that you normally use to this brand new checking account that you've opened up called income holding. So when you get paid, the money is first going to go into the income holding account. As a quick example, let's say that you got paid today. So this would be, paycheck from employer. There's no category because it's off budget and you're going to have an inflow. Let's say that you got, a big quarterly bonus today. And so that came in and you got $35,000. All right. So rather than that going into your checking account and then you paying off a bunch of credit card debt or things you've been running up to sort of play catch up now, which is what I see a lot of people doing. What I want you to do is send it to this income holding account. Now, this next step is key. Rather than acting like a W-2 employee, which you may be, I want you to start acting like a business owner or a freelancer and put you, the person who goes and spends your money, who's married to your spouse and lives in the house you live in, I want you to put your personal life on a set salary. And then you, the person who works for your employer, you're going to sort of hold that money in between. What do I mean by that? Well, let's use nice round numbers for example. Let's say that, on average, if you took a whole year, you made $250,000, right? So divide that by 12. That means roughly you're going to get $20,833 per month. Let's just set that as our normal monthly salary. So what you're going to do is when this big quarterly bonus comes in, you're going to add a transaction and you're going to move money. You're going to transfer it from the income holding actually up to the checking account. Let's go to our checking account to do that. So now we'll say add transaction. The transfer will be transfer from income holding. This will be to be budgeted just like if it was a normal salary. Again, if you've watched any of my other YNAB videos, you know about this. And we're going to move that normal salaried amount, the same amount every single month. Now, here's the beautiful thing. What's going to happen is now you're still going to have like $14,000 in that income holding account, still sitting there. So when you get paid next month, which doesn't include your normal bonus money, right? This is just your normal salary. It doesn't include that quarterly bonus or the year-end bonus like that you just got. You're now going to have enough money to still be able to afford to pay yourself whatever your average yearly amount is. Now, I'm going to go ahead and move on from this tip. If you have any questions, please leave a comment down below or feel free to email me directly about your unique situation, nick@map.money.com. The big idea here is that for a lot of high-income people, your income can take wild swings, and you might even get, 50 or 60% of your yearly income, once annually. And so what you want to do is when you get that large chunk of money, you want to set it aside and then drip it to your normal main checking account a little bit every single month, so that in your personal life, you feel like you're getting the same every month, even though technically your income is variable. People thrive on consistency and habits. And so what we want to do is try and make our actual YNAB budget, our normal personal life, feel as consistent as possible. And this is the way that I like to set this up. All right, tip number 4 is to set goals for every single category. So you want to go through here and set goals for, of course, all of your fixed bills. You can set monthly goals for those. Anything that's occurring weekly, like maybe counseling or therapy at $125 a week, we're still going to set a monthly goal for that. Just multiply the weekly amount by, the average number of times you go per month, do 500 monthly contribution, and rock and roll. Of course, this also means all of your living and your fun stuff, like your eating out, your fast food, meal delivery, food prep, coffee, quick kind of stuff. Of course, your Ubers and your ride shares in the big cities. A special place to pay a lot of attention to is kid stuff, especially the stuff like private school tuition that can come once or twice a year. For these, for example, you might want to set a goal for target balance, $22,000, for example, by May 2021. You also want to make sure and outline anything else your kids are doing that is going to be a big impact to your budget. Lastly, this is especially important in certain cities when we want to make sure that we prepare for your property taxes. In this case, like in California, for example, you have a couple times a year that property taxes are due. I typically will break these out, one in November, one in February, let's say, if that's how yours are done. And we'll set target balance goals for both of those so that we are making sure that we're always ready to pay those property taxes when the time comes. Lastly, if you have any big trips on the horizon, we're going to put these down here in the savings on budget. Now, me personally, rather than having a big, one single trips category, I'll actually break out and create a brand new category for every single trip. So maybe you're going to take a Europe trip in the fall of 2020, assuming, of course, that we're all going to be able to travel by then, or maybe you want to go to Vail in January 2021. We can set by date goals and the amount and the month that we want to have for those. This is going to make sure that you're going to have plenty of money by the time booking the trip actually rolls around. And of course, if you've seen my goals video, we set goals for 2 main reasons. Number 1, it's so that we can keep track of how much we're planning to spend. If we go forward into May and we look and see that we haven't budgeted anything, we can see over here on the right-hand side this underfunded number. In this case, it's $21,831.91. That is the total of all of our goals that have not yet been met for the month of May, which, because we haven't budgeted anything in May, that's all of our goals. So this number right here, whatever this is, that number needs to be less than your average monthly income. So that's the number 1 place goals play a big part. They help us forecast and see what our game plan is and if we can actually afford that game plan. The second things goals do is they save us a ton of time. So rather than having to budget individually and say, okay, here's $55 for storage and $156 for pet insurance and $6.99 for Disney Plus, once we get our paycheck, like we can see up here, we can actually just select whole groups at a time, click that underfunded number, and boom, immediately budget for all of this. If we have enough money, we can just underfund and budget for everything. So now you can see we are fully budgeted for the rest of April. We've got a little bit of money left, so now we can go ahead and start getting a head start on a lot of May's expenses as well. Go ahead and throw the rest of that in there. Okay, now let's move on to tip number 5, which is to install the YNAB Toolkit extension for Google Chrome or Firefox. I have a whole video on how to go about that, but once you do, it's going to add in a lot of functionality. So I'm going to turn mine on and refresh YNAB and show you the main things that I think are the most helpful. So once you get the toolkit installed, my favorite feature, hands down, is adding in this goal column so that we can quickly see the exact goal amount that we've set for every single category. You can do that by going into the toolkit settings, clicking on the budget screen, and scrolling all the way down to this one right here, display target goal amount and over budget warning. You're going to want to select display goal with no emphasis. Now, the second thing I like to do is add in our total monthly goals over here on the right-hand side. Again, this keeps you from having to always check underfunded by going forward. Now we can just see, oh, our total monthly goals for April is $22,891.23. Hopefully, that's how much we make in income. If we don't, then we know that we need to lower our goal amounts. Now, the other two, most important features, in my opinion, this one here, it's simply an expander. So it allows you to quickly expand all of your groups, which is extremely helpful if you have a lot of categories, keeps you from having to scroll up and down all the time. You can just quickly, show them and then open up just the thing you care about. And then the last one is it actually changes the yellow color on a category that just needs to have a goal fully funded, changes it to blue. So now it adds a whole new color to YNAB, and we can see all these blue colors right here. Normally they would be yellow, and it would mean that I have a goal that I haven't fully funded yet. Well, now if I ever see yellow, it's only going to be yellow if I've overspent on a credit card. Instead, blue is only going to be there for, hey, you haven't fully funded a goal, which is, again, extremely helpful. If you aren't sure what I'm talking about, be sure to watch my YNAB beginners video where I explain what the different colors mean and how they work inside YNAB. Okay, this brings me to tip number 6, which is to use the underfunded number to quickly gauge where the big hitters are in your budget. So let's go ahead and go forward into June. All you need to do for this one is go to a month where you haven't budgeted anything. Quick, easy way to do that is basically just click this drop down and then select the furthest month ahead you can get. In this case, it's June. And now what I can do is select whole groups at a time and then look at underfunded to get an idea of where the big hitters are in my budget. In this case, if I select fixed expenses group, I can see that every month we have $23.82 in fixed expenses. Now, on a budget of around $22,000, it's not huge. Let's look at debt repayment. Okay, so there's a pretty big hitter, right? Between the mortgage, the couple of car loans, and the student loan, we're $5,085 a month on, a roughly $20,000 a month budget. That's nearly 25% just on debt repayment. We can see living expenses, okay, $2,300, not huge, but 12% of the budget or so. Fund spending, not huge. Kids, this one's probably going to be a big one. Yep. So now again, we're pushing that 22% mark for the budget. Let's look at our long terms. Okay, $2,300. Of course, down here in our savings on budget for some of those big trips, savings off budget for, our investments and things like that. So what's nice is you can just sort of scroll through here, select a couple of category groups, and quickly get an idea of where a large chunk of your money is going. All right, that brings us to tip number 7, which is to implement some regular YNAB routines into your life. You can probably tell that a big theme of this whole video is to simplify, simplify, simplify. We need to get you using this thing. I've seen so many high-income earners with lots of transactions get overwhelmed because it's just too much going on and throw in the towel and ultimately quit. That is not what we want. So To do that, I want to give you 3 different routines that have helped me and a lot of the folks I've worked with to actually stick with their YNAB budget. Now, luckily, I've got downloadables and checklists on these routines, and I've also got other videos here on YouTube that explain these in detail. But here they are. First, your daily routine. What should you be doing on a daily basis? Well, all you need to be doing on a daily basis is importing your transactions if you've got your stuff linked and categorizing them. If you can spend 10 to 15 minutes a day when you're first starting out importing the 2 to 5 transactions that happen that day, that will save you a ton of time and always keep YNAB up to date. And 10 minutes a day after dinner at night while you're watching some Netflix, not a big deal. The next routine I want you to pay attention to is on payday. So when you get those big paychecks, if you've got them going to income holding or if you've got them coming directly to your checking account, either way, there's 2 things you want to do. First, you need to reconcile your accounts. I'm not going to cover that in this video. I've got a whole video on reconciling. And then second, you want to actually budget this money. So you can see we're still, sitting with some money up until we budgeted. Every time you get paid, when that money comes in, I want you to budget all of that money down to where it's at 0. This is where the goals come in, right? We can quickly just budget a bunch of this money, get all that down to 0, and boom, now we're at 0. That needs to happen every single payday. And the last routine I want you to run is your end of month routine. Now again, I have a whole video on this, but very quickly, your end of month routine, you're going to reconcile, same thing you did on payday, get all these accounts perfect and up to date and matching. Next, you're going to scroll through your budget, make sure that you don't have any overspending in your categories, no red, no yellow negative, no overspending on your stuff. And then number 3, you're going to look at all the green, all the money that you still have that's positive in the available column, and you're going to ask yourself if you want it to stay there and roll over, or if you want to go ahead and move that money to be budgeted and go ahead and go into the next month to get a jump start. Again, watch the end of month routine video for more in-depth on that. But the main thing here is that if you can implement these 3 routines, daily, payday, and end of month, you're going to drastically simplify your YNAB workflow and then also speed up the amount of time it takes for you to get comfortable with YNAB. All of that, of course, is going to help you stick with the program long term and actually start using your money to get where you want to go and do the things that you want to do. All right, tip number 8 is to understand and make sure to differentiate between the savings on budget and the savings off budget. So what do I mean? Well, I'm going to open this up and now just focus on these 2 groups here. So our savings on budget group, this is where you're going to keep shorter term saving goals, maybe like those trips we were talking about earlier, maybe a kitchen renovation or a new car. Maybe you just have a certain amount of money you want to sit there. And these categories are going to perfectly represent one savings account. So a lot of people with YNAB get frustrated because when they first start out in YNAB, none of this is there. And when they add their stuff to YNAB, they're like, hey, my savings account has $18,000 in it and it's up here and to be budgeted. I don't want to budget that money. I don't want to spend that money. And the good thing about YNAB is just because it's in to be budgeted doesn't mean you have to budget it for expenses. You can create categories to say exactly what you want that money to do. So this is where I recommend having one savings account, and we're going to tell this money exactly what we want it to do. In this case, we're going to put a lot of this set aside for the nice kitchen renovation we're saving up for. We're going to go ahead and throw some money into our European vacation for later this year. And like you, like me, a lot of us have certain amounts of money that we just honestly don't want to touch. We just want to leave it in the savings account to make us feel good. If that's you, create a category called Just Sit There and go ahead and budget $5,000 or whatever your number is. And then the rest of it, maybe I will throw down into that veil category right down here. The key with this group is to understand that the total right here in the available column, this one right here, because see, if I go into May, it'll still be there. This total, $18,000, needs to always match the actual balance of the account, because this screen, this account side tells us, hey, you have $18,000 in your account, and this tells us what that $18,000 is actually for. We have $18,000 in the account. $9,000 is for the kitchen, $3,000 is for Europe, 1,000 is for Vail, and 5,000 is to just sit there. Now, for all your other accounts, right, your investment accounts, any savings for your kids' college or anything like that, emergency fund, all that stuff, when we set that up, we're going to always choose asset. We're going to always choose asset and get it off budget down here in the tracking section. And if we're ever making transfers, like we're getting paid and we want to make a transfer to build up our emergency or contribute to our solo 401k or increase our HSA or our investment to our kids' accounts, we're going to do that with categories down here. And you're just going to add categories for whatever you need. Maybe you have an HSA contribution, or maybe you have a 529 contribution. You're just going to create a category in the savings off budget group. And when you make a transfer from checking to one of those off budget accounts, you're going to use this category to make that transfer. And you would treat it just the same way that you would treat any other bill. You have that transaction hit your checking account and you categorize it in the same way that you categorize your mortgage or going to the grocery store. We're just going to categorize, our contribution to our 529 or HSA. Bottom line here, savings on budget, short-term stuff, savings off budget, tracking section stuff. That's the long-term, big picture, wealth building / kid stuff that really just needs to be out of sight or out of mind. Now, this brings us to tip number 9, which is to constantly be analyzing your reports. When I say that, I really just mean, at least once a month, once you've got, a few months under your belt, I want you digging into the YNAB reports and really analyzing where your money is going. High cost of living area, high income earners tend to be especially susceptible to societal pressure from their friends, family, and their coworkers. The cars you drive, the places you live, the houses you purchase, and the trips that you take, even where you send the kids to school, the extracurriculars the kids are doing, all that stuff, it's very easy to make certain decisions because of who else is making those decisions around you. And unfortunately, a lot of those decisions can get very, very expensive. So at least once a month, I want you in your reports looking and seeing where these large amounts of money are going. Where's the money going? And really talking with your spouse, if you're married, about what's important to you and your family. The places to pay special attention to for you guys is going to be your fixed group, your debt repayment group, your kids group, and then any specific categories that have to do with convenience shopping, right? Think ride sharing or Uber Eats, anything that buys you time or convenience. That is one area that I consistently see getting constantly overspent. Now, be sure to check out my YNAB playlist for all the supporting videos that I mentioned earlier. You can also download my YNAB routines checklist or learn more about working directly with me using the links down in the description below. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.